Hello guys, so I'm back with another variables tutorial, and in this video we are gonna mimic the iOS behavior when adding a new contact to your contact list by simply typing in the first name and last name, and iOS will automatically detect the initials and show those instead of the default user picture or icon. So let's get into it. Hello everyone. In this tutorial, I'm gonna show you how we can use variables in different ways also. And this is what we are going to build. So if you guys know, let's say for example in iOS, and this is what I used for this specific tutorial. When you go to your contact list, there's this plus button here to add a new contact. And if you tap this, it animates this layer sheet where you can type the first name, the last name, and the initials will show directly instead of this default profile picture, right? So as you can see, I animated this layer sheet so to mimic the iOS behavior, and gladly with ProtoPie 7.8 we have a lot of new easing effects, right? So first thing first, when you look here at this tap trigger for the new contact, which is tapping this plus button, there's a move response to move this layer sheet, and I'm moving it to 60 pixels on the y-axis, and on the easing I used an ease out expo with 0.6 seconds. And if you look here, this is the new easing window in ProtoPie 7.8. So these are the standard easing presets that you can choose from. And if you also click on the drop down, you can see you can choose ease out cubic, quad, quart, and for this example I chose expo. You can also adjust the duration and the different X and Y values. You can also create like a custom and then download that specific custom preset to share it with developers, for example. And also I used an opacity response, which, as you can see here, it decreases the opacity of this main screen to 70. All right, because now, as you can see, if you click on this plus button, this is how the previous screen or the screen behind is dimmed, so we can focus on the new contact layer sheet. And I've also used some other responses to move this contact screen. So I need to move it, let's say, to 48. I adjusted the corner radius to 14 because initially it has a corner radius of 45, as you can see here. So radius 45, and here I adjusted it to 14. And I've also scaled it. As you can see, if you click this plus button, it scales down also, right? And then it scales up. But here there's a small trick, because if you use the size to scale the screen with, then it won't actually scale all the inner pieces. And that's why actually I've selected factor. So I need to scale it to 90% on the X. I've also used the ease out expo 0.8 seconds for the duration. And this is the effect that you get. Now, this is not what we are going to focus on in this tutorial, but actually now, let's say I want to enter a name here. Let's say Matthias. And then you can see whatever I type here, it always takes the first letter and it shows it here instead the default profile picture. And if I go to the last name, for example, and let's try to type any letter, for example, Olive, right? You can see it shows MO as the initials. And if I delete, it also resets. And if I delete everything, it resets the default profile picture. And let's say I started to type the last name, Olive, and then I go back to the first name, Matthias, and now you can see it also places the M first. And this is the behavior that we are going to build together in this tutorial. Let's get straight into it. So, coming back to the tutorial, I've duplicated the previous pie, but here I removed all the respective variables, triggers and responses, so we can create those together. So, as you can see here, we have in this scene 1, this main screen for the contacts, and then we have another container, which is new contact layer sheet. It's a separate group, right, that we want to animate. Alright, also there's this, if you look on the layers panel, there's this initials group that's hidden now, but if I show this again, there's a text layer inside and a circle background, just this gray circle behind the initials. And what we want to do actually is to replace this initials text with whatever the user types in the first name and the last name. But initially I would like to hide this, so because by default iOS shows this profile icon. This profile icon is just an image I placed here, and all the other UI is also created just inside ProtoPie. I didn't use like Figma or any design tool for this, which is also amazing. So what we want to achieve actually is we have this first name input and we have this last name input, right? And to create the inputs, you need to go up here to the text, click the text, and then you'll choose input. And I simply renamed those into first name and last name. And in order to do this, I will start by creating a variable, and the first variable will be first name var, just to differentiate it and ensure that I'm using the variable, and this one will be last name var. Alright, and now I need to detect what value am I typing inside of these two inputs, right? So these inputs hold text, and then I need to choose text for the first name and the last name variables rather than number. And I will also go and use the detect trigger to detect first the first name input, and instead of choosing X, I need to detect the text because this is what the user will be typing there. And I will rename this first name input. And here I will use the assign response and select the first name variable, and we will use a small formula. So I click on this fx here and I will type, or you can simply click this plus button to add reference, and I will use the first name input layer.text. And now to confirm that the variable is working as expected, you can hover over the variable and you will see the ladybug here. If you click this ladybug, this will display the variable on your screen. So let's try. I will click on the first name input and I will type. And as you can see, the variable is printing whatever I am typing in the first name input. So let's duplicate this and do the same for the last name. So I will rename here last name input, detect the last name, and on the assign I will simply replace last name.text. And now we have another variable. Let's try it out. So I will type in the first name Matthias and then the last name Olive. Oops, there's something wrong. Yeah. And the assign, I need to ensure that I select last name. And now it should be working perfectly. Matthias Olive. Cool, isn't it? So now you can see whatever I'm typing in these inputs is printed directly in the respective variable. Next, we want to get the initials. So I will create a new variable only for this scene because I would like to assign a formula directly to this variable rather than use the detect. And I will rename this as initials var. Let's click the ladybug to display the value. And I will choose text and use formula. And this is what we'll be using here. There's a left function, this one here. So you can see it says left, source, text, and the count should be a number. And what this left does, actually it extracts a part of a text from the left side based on a specific number of characters. And if you would like to extract a text from the right side, then you will use the right function. But for now, I will simply use the left since I only want to use the very first letter as the initial. So let's go back to my formula and I will type left and then I will choose the first name var, comma, 1. Sorry, let me change my keyboard language. 1 plus left last name var 1. And now you can see here it displays the formula directly. And now let's try it out. So if I type in the first name Matthias, you can see in the initials variable it displays the M letter, which is the very first letter. And in the last name, let's type Olive. Cool. And now in the initials variable, it detects MO. And if I delete this, it also works perfectly. And then I can type something else. Let's say G, and then you can see MJ, right? And the great thing also, if I start to type on the last name, Olive, and then the first name, Matthias, right? It also and always places the first name letter first and then the last name initial. Cool. We're kind of done with this tutorial. What we want to do now is again to show this initials layer on top of the default photo. So to do this, I need to detect again. But now I need to detect the initials variable. Let's rename this initials var. And I'm gonna use a condition. And this condition will state that whenever the initials variable length is bigger than 0, which means that this initials variables contains at least one character, then directly show the initials layer. So here you go. I'm gonna use a formula. Length initials variable is bigger than 0. Then I'm gonna select the initials layer, choose the opacity response, and make it 100. Let's also use, we can actually simply make the duration 0. Now let's try it out. So now I can see the default photo. In the first name I will type a letter, and here you go. Now you can see that Matthias shows directly here. Awesome. And if I type Olive, it also shows here. Cool. So the other condition that I'd like to add is to hide the initials layer when there's nothing typed actually. So I duplicate this and I will only change the sign to equal. So if the length of the initials variable is equal to 0, then hide the initials again. Awesome. Next, we would like to replace this initials text with whatever is displayed in the initials variable. So we can still use this detect trigger here, and we will hit this plus button. I will choose text, and here I will look for the initials text, and here I will use a formula to assign that variable. I will choose initials variable, and now we're done. So let's hit the plus button again. I will type again Matthias, and here you go. This is the M displayed here, and here I'm gonna type Olive, and here are the initials. Now if I delete Matthias, it keeps the O, but at any time I type any name, let's say Vincent, it always shows the first name initial first. But also, if I delete Olive and first name, it hides the initials group again. And this is where this variable, why we have this variable or this condition. Like if the length of the initials variable equal to 0, then hide the initials. Alright, so let's hide those ladybugs to try it again. You can see how the animation is smooth, and then let's try to type again, Matthias, Olive. Perfect, isn't it? And now just one more thing. If you hit cancel and then you tap the plus button again, you can see that there's a new scene. And I can try it again and again and again. And in order to do this, I've added this tap trigger to dismiss the new contact layer sheet, which is tapping this cancel button here. And by tapping this cancel button, I'm resetting the new contact layer sheet. I'm resetting the contacts, which resets the position, the scale, the corner radius, anything, any value I have changed. And also reset the last input and the first input. But the reason why I've added a 0.6 seconds as a delay for the inputs is because I want to reset those after I close. So, you don't really see the change for those inputs while you're still seeing that layer sheet, right? So this happens after you dismiss the layer sheet. And this is what I wanted to show you today. I hope it helps you guys, and see you in the next video. Thank you.